I'd like to call to order the special call meeting of the Bowling Green Board of Commissioners this 9th day of September 2014 at 9 a.m. Please call the roll, Ms. Schaller.
Commissioner Denny.
Here.
Commissioner Hill.
Here.
Commissioner Waltrip.
Here.
Commissioner Williams.
Here.
Mayor Wilkerson.
Here. The purpose of this special meeting is one of a police employee hearing when it comes to an allegation against a police officer. There are certain requirements that we have to follow under Kentucky Revised Statute Chapter 15-520 and 95-450. I hope that we have followed all of those requirements to come to this point. At this point, we have the Bowling Green Police Department Chief Doug Hawkins, represented by Attorney Wes Milliken, and Sergeant Danica Kay, represented by Attorney Alan Simpson. Gentlemen, have y'all had an opportunity to read all of the information? Are there any issues we need to deal with with regard to those two KRSs to bring us to this point?
Not at this time, Your Honor.
We're ready to proceed.
All right. Well, we do have one question before we begin. You have the option of this being an open or a closed hearing under KRS, and we'll offer you that opportunity to close it if you wish.
Mayor, we'd like to have an open hearing.
That would be fine. In that case, Ms. Schaller, if you would please read the charges.
We've agreed to waive that if it would expedite matters.
I'd actually like the charges to be read.
I believe I'd like everybody to know what we're doing here and make sure that everybody has a copy of it in front of them to read.
Mayor, before we do that,
Yes,
two
sir.
things. One, I would ask that the police chief or the police department, the city, designate an authorized representative to sit at council table. And I would also move to invoke the rule of separation of witnesses.
Before we read the charges?
Please.
I designate the chief, Your Honor, and certainly don't have any objection to invoking the rule on separation of witnesses.
I understand. Now, you have some witnesses that will be temporarily excused but still will remain under subpoena, and they'll return upon your notification. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. And the clerk has also assisted me in that. They're Jonathan Hubbard, Pam Hubbard, and Mr. James Allen, and we have gotten their phone numbers, and they just need some instruction from Your Honor about being available and not to watch this broadcast.
Those three, are you guys present in the room? Is that correct? Right, I see two. Where's the third one, Mr. Allen?
Well,
Yeah.
guess we need to get Mr. Allen.
Let Ashley do that if you don't mind, Katie. Mr. Allen, you and the Hubbards have been subpoenaed by Mr. Simpson on behalf of the defense in this case. If you will understand that we've got a long way to get before we get to you, so you'll be temporarily excused. You'll be temporarily excused, but please make yourself available by phone. I believe you've given your number to the clerk and to Mr. Simpson, and we'll try to give you enough notice to get back here in time. You understand? I will instruct you, please do not watch this broadcast on the news, and I'll be asking you that question under oath when you return, just to make sure that you're not tainted by any other witnesses. Or is everybody understood and clear on that? Okay, you'll be temporarily excused until we notify you later on this afternoon. Thank you for being here as early as you were. With regard to the other witnesses, are there any others in the room that will be called today?
None of ours, Your Honor, and I would assume that the rule of separation of witnesses would apply to any witness that Mr. Milliken may call as it relates to them watching this on television as well.
That's correct. I think we've disconnected the TV in the room where the witnesses are actually
From
waiting.
any location.
Beg pardon?
From any location.
We hope. All right.
Thank you.
All right, please read the charges.
On Saturday, April 26, 2014, at 2144 hours, Sergeant Danica Kay responded to a report of subjects fighting at West 11th Avenue and Payne Street. Police report Police Report 2014-0329 describes a scene in which Sergeant K discovered an adult female, Christy Faye Gammon, to be intoxicated and bleeding from her hands. Gammon was yelling and cursing at subjects on Payne Street. Sergeant K warned Gammon about disorderly behavior. Gammon continued to yell and curse at the initial subjects and Sergeant K. Sergeant K informed Gammon that she was under arrest and attempted to place her in handcuffs. Gammon pulled away from Sergeant K and a brief scuffle ensued on the ground. Gammon was handcuffed by Sergeant K and continued to kick at Sergeant K from a seated position. Sergeant K had the subject arrested. After Sergeant K had the subject arrested, Officer Owen arrived at the scene. Gammon then spit on Sergeant K's uniform. Upon being spat on, Sergeant K lost all patience with Gammon and struck her a number of times in the face with a closed fist while Gammon was handcuffed on the ground. Witness accounts of the incident describe the brutality of this beating delivered by Sergeant K. Prior to the beating, Sergeant K had called EMS to the scene to examine the subject. However, when EMS arrived after the beating, they were advised by Sergeant K that the subject did not need treatment, and EMS personnel were never given access to the subject, who was instead transported to the Warren County Regional Jail for booking. The incident reports indicate Gammon refused treatment. Count 1. The foregoing statement of facts constitutes an assault under KRS 508020 and/or 508030 by Sergeant Danica K. The foregoing statements of facts constitutes this is count 2. The foregoing statements of facts constitute a violation of KRS 431025, paragraph 3 by Sergeant Danica K, unnecessary use of force and violence. Count 3. The foregoing statement of facts constitutes a violation of KRS 503090 by Sergeant Danica K, unjustified use of physical force. Count 4. The foregoing statements of facts constitutes a violation of the Bowling Green Police Department Policy 2.10.2.2.8, conformance to law by Sergeant Danica K. Count 5. The foregoing statements of facts constitutes a violation of the Bowling Green Police Department Policy 2.10.2.2.31, truthfulness by Sergeant Danica K. Count 6. The foregoing statements of facts constitutes a violation of Bowling Green Police Department Policy 2.10.2.2.33, unsatisfactory performance by Sergeant Danica K. Count 7. The foregoing statements of facts constitutes a violation of the Bowling Green Police Department Policy 2.1.2.2.37, use of force by Sergeant Danica K. Count 8. The foregoing statements of facts constitutes a violation of the Police Department Policy 4.3.24.2, paragraph 2, special transportation situations by Sergeant Danica K.
Thank you, Ms. Schaller. Now, this is a police employee hearing. This is not a criminal trial, and although you will hear the words, defendant or guilty or innocent, this is actually a civil process regarding employee regulations. Are there any questions before we go? Are there any other issues that you need to bring to the judge's attention?
Mayor, the only thing I would ask, it's always confusing in these administrative hearings, is what the standard of proof will be. Will it be preponderance of the evidence, clear and convincing evidence, or proof beyond a reasonable doubt?
It's my understanding that preponderance of the evidence is the standard of proof that we'll be using.
Just for the record, note my objection. Thank you.
Note your objection.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry. Yes.
And that reminds me that there are microphones around for us to use. Mr. Milliken and Mr. Simpson, we have one, but the witnesses will come and sit at the chair where the microphone is standing above the bar so that we can all hear you. Any other issues or motions that we need to do beforehand?
Your Honor, I don't know if you want to address this now, but I had filed a written motion in limine regarding relevance on certain witnesses and things, and I don't know if you want to rule on that at this juncture or if you just want to see how the proof comes in as far as that's concerned, but I just wanted to bring that up at the outset, that I had filed that written motion.
I do have your motion, and I have Mr. Simpson's response, and your indication that perhaps it might be just a little early for that is probably a good way to go with it. I've discussed it with Mr. Harmon. And at this point, if you have an objection with regard to evidence coming in at this point in the trial, I'll entertain your at that point. But right now, we'll just set it aside.
Very good. I just felt like I needed to,
I understand.
for the record, put that note that I had filed that motion, Your Honor.
All right. The process will be similar to any civil proceeding. Mr. Milliken will have time for an opening statement. And when he completes, Mr. Simpson will have an opportunity to provide an opening statement at that time, or you may reserve it till you get ready to present your proof. Then you'll be followed up with your witnesses and exhibits. And then obviously Mr. Simpson will be able to cross-examine your witnesses. And we'll stand by for just a moment. We will be taking ample breaks today, and I know that you'll want to present a full and complete case. I would urge you that conciseness is helpful in us not getting lost in the details. Mr. Milliken, Mr. Simpson, both of you have presented a witness and exhibit list. Do you expect to deviate from that list at this
Hopefully not.
point?
No, sir.
Hope not.
When you,
Unless someone watches it on TV and says that comes down here like they do on Perry Mason and says they saw it and they forgot to tell anybody.
all right. Just for your information, when the witness comes forward, we'll swear them in, and I'll ask you to tell me what they're going to testify to very briefly. And obviously, if anyone has an objection to, you guys know the law school I went to, so give me time to consult and think about it here. All right, Mr. Milliken, you have an opening statement?
Yes, sir. May I use the podium?
You may.
Yes, sir. Good morning.
Good morning.
I think you all know me. I'm Wes Milliken. I represent the Bowling Green Police Department in this disciplinary hearing against Sergeant Danica Kay, who is seated over there by Mr. Simpson. As Mr. Harmon has advised you and the mayor, there was an internal police investigation regarding this incident, which resulted in the charges being brought. This was not a citizen complaint situation. The charges were brought as a result of an internal investigation. Your task in this phase of this proceeding is to listen to the relevant evidence regarding the incident in question and to determine the facts by preponderance of the evidence and apply the facts to the law as stated in the instructions, which you all, if you haven't already, will receive the instructions. there's a couple of legal terms in there I want to discuss with you before I get into the facts. Relevant evidence. It's defined in the Kentucky Rules of Evidence as evidence having any tendency to make the existence of any fact that is of consequence to the determination of the action either more or less probable than it would be without the evidence. That is relevant evidence. To put it in English, basically what relevance boils down to is, does the evidence tend to prove or disprove what happened that night? Or does it have nothing to do with that? Is it something else? Does the evidence tend to prove or disprove that Sergeant K is guilty of the charges that you heard, or does it have nothing to do with it? That's relevance. So I'm going to ask you to keep that in mind as you're hearing the proof in this. What's relevant to proving or disproving the charges? The next legal term that I want to talk about for just a second is the legal standard. And that was briefly touched on just a minute ago. It's by preponderance of the evidence. I have the burden of proof in proving these charges. No question about that. But this is not a criminal case where you have to prove someone guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. This is a much lower standard of proof. Preponderance of the evidence. What preponderance of the evidence, what that standard means is, I just have to prove more likely than not that the conduct justifying the factual basis for the charge occurred. More likely than not. In other words, another way to say this is, in order for you to find Sergeant K guilty of the charges, you must believe from the evidence that more likely than not, the facts constituting the factual basis for the charge occurred. So that's the standard that you're dealing with here. You just have to determine what the facts are based on the relevant evidence, and you have to apply the law to the facts. So, and it's not beyond a reasonable doubt, which is the criminal standard. It's not clear and convincing, which is another kind of mid-level standard. This is just by preponderance of the evidence, which means more likely than not, in simple language. This is not a smoking gun case where it's not a whodunit or anything like this. Basically, this internal investigation, the proof was initiated as a result of a self-report situation. So it's not whodunit or no, I didn't do that. The proof in the case is pretty straightforward from Sergeant Danica Kay's own reports. And the facts are pretty straightforward. They're laid out in the charges. On April 26th, Sergeant Kay responded to a call of a fight in progress at the corner of 11th and Payne Street. According to her own reports and statements about the incident, Sergeant Kay encountered one Christy Gammon, who was highly intoxicated. She was bleeding, she was staggering, she was yelling and cursing. I think she only had one shoe on. Clearly she was in a bad state. Sergeant Kay attempted to get Miss Gammon under control. Gammon refused to calm down. Sergeant Kay placed her under arrest for disorderly conduct. Gammon resisted. There was a brief scuffle. Sergeant Kay was able to get Gammon on her stomach and cuff her hands behind her back. And that's a significant fact in this case. She got her down, got her arrested, got her cuffed. At this point, Gammon is on the ground, on her stomach, and according to Sergeant Kay's report, she's on top of her, handcuffing her behind her back with her knee in her back. And at this point, Gammon says that she's pregnant. So as soon as she says that, Officer Kay gets off of her, takes her knee out of her back, pulls her up to a seated position, still handcuffed with her hands behind her back. We take no issue with the arrest itself. She took her under control, she handcuffed her, she had her in custody at that point. Although she was on the ground and handcuffed, Gammon was still continuing to yell and scream and curse and kick and flail around on the ground, okay, in the handcuffs, with the handcuffs behind her back. At this point, Sergeant K disengaged from her and called what they refer to as MedCom, what I refer to as EMS. She called EMS for the arrestee. According to her later statements, Sergeant K's later statements, she gave 5 reasons for initially calling EMS. 1, Gammon was bleeding from her hands and possibly other places. 2, she was obviously under the influence of alcohol and drugs. 3, she claimed to be pregnant. Didn't know if that was so or not. 4, Sergeant K described her as suffering from an excited delirium, which you'll hear some testimony about what that means. But that was number 4. And also the 5th reason that Sergeant K called EMS is because she had to use force in taking her down to the ground. And so for all of these reasons, Sergeant K wanted Gammon to be assessed at the scene. So she calls EMS. Around in that time is when Officer Owen arrives, who was the backing officer, and you'll hear from Officer Owen. According to Sergeant K, from radio traffic, K was aware that Gammon was a 1060 communicable disease risk because she had hepatitis. So Sergeant K is aware of that. Gammon is still laying there on the ground, flailing around in handcuffs, kicking and yelling and acting drunk. Sergeant K then reapproaches her from the front and in an attempt to make her sit up and calm down and quit. And there's some other people that are there trying to calm her down as well. Well, after Sergeant K reapproaches her from the front, after she'd called EMS, Gammon spits at Sergeant K, spits up at her, and it lands on her uniform. You'll see some pictures of it about right here. So, the proof would be that in response to being spit on, and these are the words of Sergeant K lost all patience with Gammon and delivered several closed fist punches to the side of Gammon's head while Gammon was handcuffed on the ground. K later said she was angry because Gammon was basically belligerent and had spit on her. To use her own words, she lost all patience and she let her have it. That's what she said herself. It'd been a long day, she was tired, and she was tired of Payne Street. That's what she said. So it just had been a long day for her. Officer Owen was there, Mr. Terry Campbell, who you'll hear from. They were both right there when this occurred. Campbell lives right there. He knew Gammon, knows her from the neighborhood, and he and others had been trying to calm her down before this assault occurred. Officer Owen saw Sergeant K give up physical control after the arrest and then reapproach from the front. Officer Owen also saw Sergeant K beating Gammon as she was handcuffed on the ground. While Owen initially was pulling Terry Campbell away, she turned to see Sergeant K punch her in the face 3 times. Terry Campbell was right there, and when it all started, Terry Campbell was kind of in the middle of it, and Officer Owen grabs him and pulls him away to get him out of the thing. And because he wasn't really doing anything, he was actually trying to help. But nevertheless, Owen saw Sergeant K punch her in the face 3 times. At that point, Officer Owen pulls K off of Gammon and says, "That's enough." And Sergeant K backs away from the situation. So, after that, the proof will be that after she beat this handcuffed girl on the ground, Officer K engaged in some banter with the crowd out there. In response to some protests for what she's done, she said words to the effect of, "That's what you get when you spit on the police." Officers Biddle, Porter, and Poteet then arrived about the same time EMS arrived. They were backing officers. They investigated the problem that caused the call in the first place. There was a brick thrown through the window. Christy Gammon had a cut on her hands. There had been some domestic disturbance. I don't believe they made any other arrests, and they weren't there to see the beating. They arrived after the fact, and don't really know anything about that part of it. They just investigated the incident that caused them to call the police to begin with. So then EMS arrives, and this is the first of all, it's our position that beating a handcuffed prisoner on the ground after she's arrested, regardless of how she's acting, is a violation of the KRS and the policies as stated in the charges. It's police brutality. You can't beat a prisoner who's handcuffed on the ground, whether she spits on you or not. The second part of the charges has to do with the denial of medical care by Sergeant K. You recall that Sergeant K, she stated in her statement 5 different reasons why she had called EMS to begin with. But then after she calls EMS, she pounds her face into the ground, which gives yet another reason why this person might need to see EMS. But nevertheless, after EMS gets there, Sergeant K talks to them and sends them away without them ever even approaching Gammon and ever assessing her in any way. All they did was they helped her with the spit on her uniform. They gave her a spit mask thing, I think. And but it's undisputed that EMS never even approached Gammon, because Kay sent them away. So we would submit to you that denying her medical care at the scene was also a violation as set forth in the charges. So after that, when something like this happens, when an officer has to use force, they have to do what's called a use of force report about it. In Sergeant K's use of force report, she falsely reported that Gammon refused treatment, when in fact Gammon was not capable of refusing treatment or anything. She was completely incoherent from Sergeant K's own account of the situation. So EMS never got to see her at the scene because Sergeant K sent them away. She was then transported to the jail by Officer Owen, where she was treated for her injuries there. So, simply stated then, the proof in this case is that she beat a handcuffed prisoner in the face with a closed fist several times while the prisoner was down on the ground, and further, she denied the prisoner medical care after having called EMS to the scene. Finally, we submit that the proof will be that she was untruthful because she falsely reported that Gammon had refused treatment when Gammon was clearly not competent to refuse because she was incoherent on alcohol and or drugs. Now, at the close of the proof, based on the relevant evidence that has to do with this situation, I'll ask you to find Sergeant K guilty of assault as defined in the KRS, unnecessary use of force or violence as defined in the KRS, unjustifiable use of force as defined in the KRS, and those are set forth in the charges, violating law in violation of Bowling Green Police Department policy, violating Bowling Green Police Department policy on truthfulness on her use of force report, saying that Gammon refused treatment, violating the Bowling Green Police Department policy on satisfactory performance, and violating the Bowling Green Police Department policy on unreasonable use of force. And our proof, in essence, will be that based on these facts, she's guilty of those charges, certainly by a preponderance of the evidence. And I believe by a higher standard because, again, most of this is from Sergeant K's own mouth in her reports. So thank you for your attention in advance to listen to this. It's a very important proceeding. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Milliken. Mr. Simpson, do you want to make an opening statement now?
Mayor and the Board of Commissioners, thank you for being here today. This is probably one of the hardest things you have to do, aside from deciding whether or not you want to raise or lower our taxes or keep them at the same rate. I'm honored to be here today on behalf of Sergeant Danica Kay. Needless to say, this is a very, very important day in her life. The Bowling Green Police Department, for whatever reason, has brought these charges, trying to terminate her from her position. And it is a position that she covets, she takes very seriously, and is a very serious job. Mr. Milliken's opening statement of what he believes the proof will be is partially factual and partially just simply doesn't exist. It's very misleading because that's not what the evidence is going to be. I'm going to play for you now, if it's okay, the two 911 calls that came in that started this entire incident on April the 26th, 2014.
Object.
Is that something that we should be entering as evidence?
It will come in as evidence through proof. It is the official
I'm-
recordings.
How much I advise you, you just be kind of summary what the evidence will be. I'd wait for the evidence.
I'm going to agree with that, Mr. Simpson, if you don't mind. It's not that I don't believe the authentication of the tape, it's just it's not the proper role of it.
When you do hear it, as I did when I hear it, I'm thankful that I'm not the one that had to go to that call. The area of town that she went to is a high crime area. It is well known for drugs, drug trafficking, and a lot of assaults and violence. And Officer Kay knew that when she went over there. She was in the parking lot at the police department getting ready to finish some reports, and on that particular afternoon, the police department was a little bit short-staffed. They had been extremely busy. It was a nice day. Everyone was outside, especially in that part of town. And they get a phone call at the police department of people screaming over the phone, "Please get somebody over here. There are people with knives over here. Somebody's going to hurt my son." And on and on and on. And it's all on the 911 calls. It's frightening to hear the 911 call. Officer K, or Sergeant K, is in the back parking lot. Dispatch, she told dispatch that she was there to do some paperwork. They called her and told her she needed to go to that call. She proceeded there, which was just a minute or so from the police department. She got there. She saw Christy Faye Gammon, who will be described by witnesses as rip-roaring, wild, buck wild, and they go on, and they go on, and they go on. I will tell you that this so-called victim, and I say so-called because this will come into evidence. This is one of the photographs that was taken at the jail of a smiling Christy Faye Gammon, the alleged victim in this case, who the police department says was beaten so severely that Mr. Milliken stands up here and calls this a beating. She wasn't beaten. This is not a picture of someone who was beaten. Miss Gammon is walking down the street, and you'll later hear that she had broken a window out and she had punched the backside of a window air conditioner, and she came running down the street, walking down the street, all disheveled, bleeding. She had already been in a fight or two, and she comes down the street, and Sergeant K, seeing this large crowd start to form, and it's dark out, says, "You need to sit down." And all these people are saying, "Christy Faye, calm down. Christy Faye, calm down." These are people she knew. And she continued, and she continued. And she was spewing profanities. And Sergeant K finally said, "If you don't stop, I'm going to arrest you for disorderly conduct." And she mouthed off again. And she sat down on the curb. And she mouthed off some more. And she threw a few racial slurs out there. She was cussing Sergeant K. She was cussing everyone involved. Sergeant K said, "Stand up. You're under arrest for disorderly conduct." So she jumped up off the curb, and she thought she was getting ready to come at her at that point. She's already heard everybody saying Christy Faye, so she knows this is the Christy Faye Gammon who is hepatitis C positive. And she turns around, surprisingly, and Officer K, or Sergeant K, walks up behind her, starts to grab her arms to get her handcuffs, and about that time, Christy Faye Gammon pulls away. And they go to the ground, finally. In the fall to the ground, face down for Christy Faye Gammon, Sergeant K finally gets on top of her and gets her handcuffs out after she rode her like a bull. You'll hear Sergeant K say it was like a rodeo. She was bucking and trying to throw her off of her. They were fighting. Sergeant K finally gets her handcuffed, and then she starts saying, "I'm pregnant, I'm pregnant." Well, that was a lie. But she didn't know it at the time, so she sits her up on her bottom. As soon as she does that, she disengages, and Miss Gammon starts flailing again and trying to kick Sergeant K. She finally, these people are standing there, this Terry Campbell guy, they're all standing there trying to get her to calm down. She won't calm down. She starts trying to kick at her again, winds back on her stomach. Now, at this point, her options are OC spray, taser. I guess a really bad option would have been her firearm, which that's not even an issue here. And she gets her back up on her bottom again, and she starts flailing and doing the same thing over and over again. Sergeant K trying to calm her down, along with two other people who I think will describe her as wild. She was not only drunk on vodka, but she had been smoking synthetic marijuana. That's about the only thing Christy Faye Gammon remembers, by the way, because Christy Faye Gammon does not remember, unless she's changed her story, does not remember this incident at all. Sergeant K approaches her one more time to try to calm her down. And one thing that Mr. Milliken left out is that she kicked at her again. And then she spit right towards her face. And the moment that happened, Sergeant K got close down on her and hit her 3 times. We're not going to deny that. It was a last resort. Sergeant K will tell you that because she was pregnant, she was afraid to tase her. Because she had a communicable hepatitis C, which is a permanent diagnosis and can ultimately kill you, she didn't feel like she should spray her with spray because she knows that the immediate reaction is tears, snot, and saliva. And she didn't want that all over her again. So she hit her 3 times. Amazingly, she stopped resisting. Now, what Sergeant K didn't know is that Officer Owen had come up from behind her because she was focused on that, and the other 20 people who were standing around and the people who were probably behind Sergeant K in this extremely dangerous situation. Now, you'll hear in the 911 tapes, and I'm assuming that the city will put this in, but during this entire incident, you will hear that Sergeant K keyed up her microphone and said, "Send MedCom." So this is not some callous person who was trying to do harm. She was actually concerned about Miss Gammon, whether she was pregnant. She's obviously high. She's been rolling around on the ground. She's had to throw her to the ground to get control of her. And so she calls for MedCom. Well, when all the other officers show up, Sergeant K, who is a supervisor after all, starts trying to figure out after Miss Gammon, the smiling Miss Gammon now, after she is in control, Sergeant K goes and tries to figure out why they came there in the first place. I don't think any person who's going to testify here is going to say that Sergeant K told EMS to leave. EMS was on the scene. EMS had every opportunity to walk up. They obviously saw who was in custody. Why EMS didn't talk to her, we don't know. But she never, ever told them not to treat her. And she just assumed when she came back and they hadn't treated her that she must have refused treatment or EMS refused to treat her because she was still causing a problem, sitting there on the ground at 11th and Payne Street. Now, Officer Owen ultimately took her to jail. Sergeant K, after she followed up and tried to figure out with some of the other officers why they were there to start with, came down to the jail. She took pictures of her. This is one of them. Now, during this whole episode, you'll hear that Miss Gammon had referred to Sergeant K as a nigger bitch a few times. And then when she got to the jail, she continued making suggestions that this was some racial thing. And Sergeant K said, "You know, Christy, that's just not true. I'm getting ready to get married this fall, and my fiance is white." Christy changed her tune. "Oh, well, that's really nice." And you'll hear Sergeant K talk about that. And lo and behold, Christy Faye Gammon apologized for the way she had acted, for what she had physically done, and for what she said. Now, you'll hear that Major Leonard went over to the jail, and I saw Miss Gammon here this morning in her orange jumpsuit, and interviewed her. And the first thing she said was, "I don't remember any of this." One of the most other important things that she said was, "How did y'all even find out about this? Did somebody call in a complaint?" So Christy Faye Gammon, a convicted felon, did not call this in. Mr. Terry Wayne Campbell, a convicted felon, who you'll hear from, didn't call this in. There are a lot of people who have felony records who the city's going to call as witnesses. Two people they did not interview will tell you that Sergeant K didn't do anything wrong. That's Mr. and Mrs. Hubbard. Mr. Allen, who they did interview, and a lot of people are afraid to talk to the police over there. Right, wrong, or otherwise, it's a fact. And Mr. Allen will tell you that, yeah, she hit her, but she was trying to get control of her. And they will describe Christy Faye Gammon as being absolutely wild. Now, the reason I think this picture is important is because the city has alleged that Sergeant K violated KRS 508020, which is assault second degree. In order to be guilty under the criminal statute, which they're alleging she violated, you have to intentionally cause serious physical injury to another person or cause physical injury by use of a deadly weapon or dangerous instrument. Well, there's no dangerous instrument or deadly weapon. So what Mr. Milliken's going to have to prove to you is that Christy Faye Gammon had a serious physical injury. And there's case law that interprets that. Christy Gammon doesn't have a serious physical injury. This is 30 minutes after she'd been at the jail. Christy Gammon, they also allege that, I guess alternatively, that if you don't believe that she has a serious physical injury, and I will tell you there are no medical records to document this. Christy Faye Gammon didn't go to the doctor. She got her hand bandaged up at the jail where she'd been throwing bricks through windows and punching air conditioners. They bandaged her hand up at the jail. That was the significance and the extent of her injuries. But I assume that alternatively they have accused Sergeant K of assault fourth degree. Again, we don't dispute that Sergeant K hit Christy Faye Gammon. However, KRS 503090 and KRS 431025 allow the police to use force, even deadly force, if necessary. And what it says is that no unnecessary force or violence shall be used in making an arrest. You heard Mr. Milliken say the police department apparently doesn't have a problem with anything that Sergeant K did up until the punch. And I think they will agree to that. But they want you to focus and have tunnel vision on that and not the entire scene out there. You will hear Sergeant K testify that she felt like she was in danger. She has been assaulted, ironically, by a client of mine who was in handcuffs, who headbutted her and chipped her tooth. So this walking around from the front thing, I would suggest to you, is the ultimate red herring in this thing. Sergeant K was trying to calm Christy Faye Gammon down. People she knew were trying to calm Christy Faye Gammon down. And no matter what they did, and no matter how they approached her, whether it's from the side, from the back, or from the front, Christy Faye Gammon was wild, and she tried to kick her one last time, and right after that, spit and try to infect Officer K, Sergeant K. Sergeant K didn't lie about anything on her reports. In fact, as you heard, I'm not sure that the city police department would have known about this or even cared about it if she had been perhaps a better writer, because she was honest. It was a bad scene out there. I would lose patience with someone who was trying to injure me. But that has nothing to do with this. If you find that Sergeant K violated these statutes, I believe that you will make it an open season on the Bowling Green Police Department.
Object to the argument.
Please continue, Mr. Simpson.
And you may as well put billboards at the entrance to town to say it's okay to fight the police in Bowling Green because they can't defend themselves. I believe that the evidence in this case will be very clear that Sergeant Danica Kay is a fantastic police officer and that she acted professionally and as best as anyone could in the circumstances that she was presented with on April the 26th at 11th and Payne. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. Are there any other issues before we call our first witness? Hearing none, you're up, Mr.
I
Wilson.
call Terry Campbell, Your Honor.
I beg pardon?
I call Terry Campbell.
Mr. Campbell.
I believe he's just right out the door. Should I go get him?
Ashley will ask for him. Could you give me just a summary of what you expect him to testify to?
Your Honor, he was there. He was a witness to the assault.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell, if you would step forward, and there's a microphone up here with a chair. We'll ask you to sit there if you would. Would you please raise your right hand? You swear the testimony you give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Please state your full name
Terry Lee Campbell,
and your address.
1053 Payne Street, Bowling Green, Kentucky.
All right, sure. And would you move that microphone a little closer to you so we can make sure we all hear you up here? Thank you. Mr. Milligan?
Thank you. So you're Mr. Terry Campbell. You reside at 1053 Payne Street. Is that correct?
Correct.
How long have you resided there, sir? Roughly?
2 years.
2 years. Are you familiar with an individual that lives in that neighborhood by the name of Christy Faye Gammon?
Yes, sir, I am.
And describe for the commission if you have any relationship with her. Are you friends with her, acquaintances, or do you just know her? What's your...
I'd like to say we're friends.
Okay. And where does she live there in the neighborhood?
Yes, sir, she lives 4 or 5 houses down a different street.
Okay. Do you know who she lives with?
Yes, sir.
And who is that?
Her father and mother, name's Terry Gammons.
Okay. Do you recall, you're here under subpoena today, correct?
Correct.
I served you with a subpoena. And you know what this is about, correct?
Correct.
I just want you to tell the commission in your own words, kind of start from the beginning, from when you knew there was some disturbance going on out there outside your house, and tell the commission in your own words, sir, what happened out there from what you observed.
Well, usually each morning and then each night, I go next door to my neighbors and visit her, and we sit and talk and, just do what neighbors do. And there was some kind of disturbance going on across the street. There were several individuals. I couldn't tell you how many, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them.
Let me interrupt you. All the paperwork suggests that this was, I think, April 26th. Does that sound right to you?
I guess it is.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And like I said, there was something going on across the street. It was a bunch of arguing and maybe a little threatening and something like that. And it went on for quite a while, 10, 15 minutes. And the next thing that I noticed, coming straight up behind us on 11th Street was a police car. And we kind of figured, you know, something's fixing to happen, so we all stayed there in the yard. Well, the officer, I'm not sure her name, but
Is that her seated at the table there?
yes, sir.
Okay.
She got out of her car and she proceeded down to where this was going on. Well, most of them had took off. There might be one or two behind the house, but Christy Fay was, she was pretty unruly.
What do you mean by unruly? Describe what you mean by it.
Well, I think she'd been drinking, I don't know, but she was acting kind of like it.
Okay.
And the officer gave her some commands, and she didn't go by it.
She didn't obey the officer's
She
commands?
didn't obey her. She was arguing with her. And as close as I can recall, the officer, it was over by a rock wall, come up and grabbed her and threw her down, grabbed her by her hair and threw her down. And she was fighting and everything, Christy Fay was. Well, I got up and I went over there. And I tried to calm her down. She was not
Tried to calm who down?
Christy Fay, the girl the officer was trying to.
When you got over there, had Sergeant K got her in cuffs yet?
She had got her in cuffs when I was there.
Okay.
I even, you know, I tried to calm Christy Fay down and this and that. And while I was talking to her, she had got her in cuffs
Okay. So you're just right there while this is happening.
right there.
And then what happened then, after she got her in cuffs?
Well, she was cussing some. The girl,
Who was cussing?
Christy Fay, was cussing at her and this and that. And she got her rolled over from her stomach. She got her rolled over and she was sitting in the road. And there was a few more words calling. And she spit on the officer.
Okay. When you say she, we're talking about Christy, right?
sir.
So Christy's handcuffed down there. Is she on her rear end at that point?
At that point, yes.
Had she kind of been flailing around? Is that
Yes, she has.
okay? So she's handcuffed on the ground and she spits, and what happens?
Well, I seen the spit and everything. It hit her right here.
Okay.
And when it hit her, the officer grabbed her by her hair, shoved her head in the pavement, and started hitting her.
Shoved her head in the pavement.
The side of her head, and she had her hair holding her in the pavement.
Okay.
And she started hitting her, you know. And I bent down and I asked her, I said, please quit hitting her, because she was handcuffed. And I just, you know, tried to hold my hands out, and it didn't do any good.
Why were you trying? Were you down there on the ground with
Yes,
them?
sir. Yes, sir.
Why were you? How were you holding your hands out? Show the commission how you were.
I just took them and held them out between Christy Fay's face and the lady's hands coming down. But it didn't do any good.
Did she keep on punching through your hands?
Well, I just had I wasn't very strong. I'd had a broken hip and a broken arm.
Okay.
And I couldn't stop it, but I did say, please quit hitting her.
So you asked Officer K, please quit hitting her, and you're down there putting your hands in trying to deflect the punches.
Yes, sir. And the next thing.
Let me ask you this first before you go on to the next thing. Where is Christy Fay's head in connection with the pavement while Sergeant K is punching her?
The side of her face, this side, was on the pavement with her hair holding her down.
Okay.
And the officer was facing this way, facing her face, and she started punching her.
Okay.
And I know she had on black gloves.
She had on black gloves?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And that's when I made my little move. I didn't try to obstruct the officer or anything. I just tried to get it stopped.
Right.
And then another lady officer come up behind me and pulled me off.
Okay.
And she didn't know what was going on. I understood this. And this lady officer that was doing the arresting told her that he was just trying to help. He wasn't doing nothing to me.
So Sergeant K tells Officer Owen he's just trying to help.
Yes, sir.
Referring to you.
Said he wasn't hindering me in any way. He was just trying to calm her down.
Okay. Sir, in your estimation, or based on your observation, I know you probably don't know exactly, but how many times did you see Sergeant K punch Christy Faye Gammon in the head down there on the ground like that while she was handcuffed?
I'd say 6 or 7, maybe 8.
6 or 7, maybe 8 times?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, was Christy Faye saying anything?
She said, I think she said, I've had enough.
Okay.
Now, that's what I think she said. I've had enough, stop it or something.
Did Officer K say anything while she was punching
Yeah.
this prisoner handcuffed
Well,
on the ground?
She said something. This is what you get when you spit on an officer. And she made that statement to a lot more people across the road.
Now say that again.
She came across the road where everybody was standing in the yard and said, this is what happens when you spit on an officer.
And that was after she'd stopped punching her, is that right?
Yes, sir. And then, I don't know I don't know if it's the same lady officer or something. It pulled me off. I don't know which one this is. There's several of them got there by then.
Right.
And somebody said something. They were leaning up against a car, and he said, I'm not doing nothing. And they said, everybody's guilty on Payne Street. That's the last that I heard any of them say anything. They took her to jail.
Mr. Milliken, I'm sorry, we got to have a microphone in order to hear you. Thanks.
Did Christy Faye calm down after she pounded her head in the concrete?
Yeah, she said, I've had enough.
Okay.
Quit it, stop, something like that. I've had enough.
Okay. Did you see EMS there?
I'm not really sure. I think I seen them there,
Okay.
but I'm not really sure. I think I
Okay.
did.
Is there anything else that you remember about Sergeant K punching Christy Faye while she was handcuffed down there on the ground?
I'm not sure what you're meaning.
Well,
I've seen her hit her.
Okay, I'm just wanting to give you a full opportunity to tell the commission everything that you recall about what you saw there.
What I saw that night, I think that the officer,
Object to his conclusions. He can testify. He can testify to what he saw, but I don't think he can make any conclusions about anything. I think that's your job.
I understand. I think he started his statements with what I saw that night. Isn't that what you started to say, what I saw that night?
well, I think I also said this to a lady police officer who interviewed me. I told her that I thought the lady acted like she was supposed to act, all the way through arresting her and everything, all the way up until after she was handcuffed. I think she was forced to do everything she was forced to do until that point.
What about after she was handcuffed?
Well, after she was handcuffed, she was being hit.
Okay. Did you ever, after Christy Faye was handcuffed, did you ever see her kick Sergeant K?
I seen her kick at her. I don't think she
at
hit her,
her?
but I seen her kick at her, yes.
Okay. Okay.
And there was some some of the words was passed between them. Christy Fay called her racial, and she said, that's not what it is. She says, I'm married to a white man.
Okay.
You know, I'm telling the best I can remember.
I understand, and
everything
I
said.
appreciate that. Did the racial stuff, was that before or after she beat her in handcuffs?
I can't be certain on that. I
Okay.
think it might have been just before she got her handcuffed, or it may have been after. I can't be certain on that part.
Do these look like the gloves that Sergeant K had on when she was punching her in the side of the head down there? To you?
Well, yeah, they were black leather gloves.
Is that like what she had on?
Yeah. And as close as I can tell, that's what they looked like.
Okay.
It was dark out there.
I understand. But you say she hit her 6 or 7, maybe 8 times in the side of the head.
Yes, sir. And she said she had enough. And that's about when I got snatched away.
Out of the way. Sir, thank you for answering my questions. Mr. Simpson will have some questions for you, I'm sure.
Mr. Simpson?
Mr. Campbell, is your nickname Soup?
Yes, sir.
How long have you gone by that nickname?
Since kindergarten.
Since kindergarten?
My last name is Campbell, and they call me
Campbell Soup?
Campbell Soup.
I understand. I've got a few nicknames too. How long have you known Christy Fay Gammon?
Approximately 2 years.
Okay, and you consider her to be a close friend?
Well, the last year, we were closer than the first year. So if I've known her for 2 years, one was an acquaintance, and then she come to my house. I broke my hip and my arm, and she'd come to my house and help me do things every now and then, checking on me.
All right. Is Miss Gammon, to the best of your knowledge, married?
To the best of my knowledge, I don't know if she's married.
Are you married?
No, sir.
She was at your house earlier this day, correct?
Probably was.
Okay. And was it there that she was drinking the vodka?
No.
Do you know where it was that she drank the vodka?
I'm not even sure she was there, but, you know, usually she comes by. No.
Okay. Did she smoke any, do you know what Provo is?
I know exactly what it is.
What is Provo?
Your Honor, I object to the relevance.
It's extremely relevant,
Can
Your
you
Honor.
give me some guidance what I'm looking for here?
Well, without tipping the witness off, it's cross-examination. I think it's going to become really relevant because Ms. Gammon's going to tell you about smoking Provo in just a little bit, and I'm trying to pry into that.
If I may just briefly, Your Honor, I'm sorry, I'm not very good with this microphone. We concede that Christy Fay Gammon was extremely under the influence. That's not the issue. What it was, how much she'd had to drink, what drugs she was on, we concede that she was under the influence. So that's not relevant to the determination here. The relevant determination is after you've got her in custody in cuffs on the ground, can you beat on her?
Mr. Simpson, is the point trying to determine that she's drunk or high, one of the two?
But what she's on is really important. You know, vodka does one thing. Synthetic weed does something completely different.
Okay.
And there's no
And
experts disclosed to talk about the effects of certain drugs and vodka or anything. And again, that is not the issue in this case. There's no dispute that she was clearly intoxicated.
You're going to hear, I assume, Ms. Gammon testify as to what she was on and who she used it with.
Okay.
It
You're
may
not
go
gonna
to
hear
some
from
of
me
the other.
because it's
It
not
may go to
relevant.
some of the other witnesses' ability to recall.
Okay. Go ahead and ask your question.
What is Provo?
It's best I can tell you, it's a synthetic something. I thought it was potpourri or something. They spray something on it.
Okay.
Have I
People,
seen it?
people smoke it, right?
Yeah.
Were you smoking it that day?
I don't allow it smoked in my house, not by Christy Fay or anyone.
Okay. So if she said something different, she would be mistaken?
She didn't smoke any of that in my house.
Were you drinking that day?
I may have been. I drank a little bit almost every day. Almost.
Almost every day. And how much did you have to drink that day?
About a half pint, maybe.
Half pint of what?
Vodka, what I drank.
Okay.
And I drank beer sometimes.
Did you have any beer that day?
No,
It was
sir.
It was a nice day that day, right? It'd been a nice day out. Nice spring day.
Probably.
And to that end, there were a lot of people outside that evening, correct?
Correct.
And you had never really seen Christy Fay Gammon in the 2 years that you knew her act as wild as she did you?
No, I've never seen her act that way.
She acted like she had almost Superman strength, didn't she? She was just rip-roaring wild. Agreed?
I agree she was wild, like you say.
She was
I don't know about what strength she had.
Do you know whether or not she was smoking spice or synthetic marijuana or Provo or?
I don't know. I didn't see her do it.
Okay. Did you see her punch the air conditioning unit? The back of the air conditioning unit on someone's house?
I seen her kick a door.
Did you call the police when that happened?
No, sir.
Why?
It was my door.
It was your door? So she kicked your door. She break it?
No, sir.
Okay. Why'd she kick your door?
I don't know. I was sitting over at my neighbor's house when she done it.
Did you see Christy Fay Gammon and her boyfriend get into a fight that day?
I seen them arguing. I never seen them.
But you knew they got in a
I
fist
knew
fight.
they had got in one. Yes, sir. She told me about it.
Okay, with her boyfriend, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then did you see her father throw her off the front porch after that?
No, sir.
Okay, you didn't know about that?
No.
Okay. So she had been in at least a fist fight with her boyfriend before Sergeant K got there, right?
Yes, sir.
And do you know how many times he hit her in the head?
Objection.
Did she tell you that?
I
Mr.
thought she
Simpson,
hit
I'm
him.
not
That's what
sure
I
what
heard.
we're leading to here.
Well, what we're leading to is that I'm not sure who caused the injuries to her.
Yeah.
They're suggesting she's got a serious physical injury.
He-
There's many different ways this could have happened.
Okay.
We got an objection on the floor, linger on that.
Yeah, my objection is, the witness stated that he knew that Christy and her boyfriend had gotten in a fight. Then Mr. Simpson turns that into a fist fight with his next question, which of course that's exactly where he's going.
Well, this is cross-examination.
Yeah, but it's not proper to misstate what his answer was. He didn't say, I don't believe, you can ask him if he observed him getting in a fist fight.
Mr.
but-
Campbell's already answered that question, that he didn't observe them get into a fight.
But Christy Fay Gammon told you that they were in a fist fight, didn't she?
She didn't say he hit her or anything like that. I had heard, and I'm not sure who I heard this from.
Then I object to the
Her.
hearsay.
Don't say what you heard from somebody if you don't know who it was, okay?
Okay.
So she comes down to your house. Was this after the fight that she had had with her boyfriend?
I believe it was.
And she was so mad when she got there, she tried to kick your door in.
I don't know if that's why she kicked my door or not.
Did you hear her going down the street saying, if anybody wants to F me, they better wear a condom because I've got HIV and I'm hepatitis C positive? Did you hear her say that?
I object
I've
to the
never heard
relevance.
it.
Never heard her say that before?
No.
Okay. So this is after dark, correct?
It was dusk or it getting dark, yes.
Okay, and so that the city commission can get some idea of the scene out there, there were dozens of people outside, correct?
Out where? Across the street or where I was?
Out in the street where this ended up happening.
I think I said it might have been 7 or 8 people out there.
Okay, and when Miss Gammon had to be taken to the ground by Sergeant K,
Yes, sir.
a large crowd started to gather, didn't they?
No, sir. Not from across the street where it was all going on. They took off. When the law showed up and she showed up, most of them ran.
Okay.
The large gathering was out in the neighbor's yard where I go to visit every day and night.
And how many people were in the neighbor's yard where you go to visit?
Could have been 10 or 11.
Okay. Isn't it true that what Officer K said was when you hit the police and spit on the police, this is what happens?
I heard her say this is what you get when you spit on a police officer.
Okay. All right. Tell me what time you drank that vodka.
Between 6 and 10 that morning.
And you're telling this commission you didn't have anything else to drink that entire day? You started drinking at 6 o'clock in the morning. You
I
quit at
didn't have any money that day. I borrowed the money to get what I got. I do know that.
10. Okay. So right before Sergeant K delivered these strikes to her with her fist, you saw Christy Faye Gammon kick at her, correct?
She was kicking.
Okay.
I'd never seen it hit her.
But she was trying to hit her.
She may have been. I don't know. She was just kicking to keep her away, or she was trying to kick her.
So right before Sergeant K hit her with her fist, she was actively still resisting, correct?
No, sir. She had her down and had her handcuffed.
Right. And she kept rolling over on her belly,
She helped get her up on her,
on her butt.
and then she did kick at her again.
Okay. She
And,
kicked at her and then she spit
and
on her.
then she spit on her, yes.
Just like, it happened just like that, didn't it?
Happened pretty quick, yes.
Okay.
I think there was some words said in between before it happened, but
Christy Faye, I mean, we're all adults here. She kept calling Sergeant K a nigger bitch, didn't she?
I didn't hear that.
You didn't hear that?
I heard her say she was racial.
She was a racial?
Yes.
She said, you're a racial.
She might have said you're a racial bitch, you know. She might have said that.
So you're not sure what she said?
No, and it wasn't because I was intoxicated or anything else. It was a lot going on around there.
Okay. You
I
would
was
agree that
trying-
Sergeant K was in a dangerous situation, was she not?
If you are trained and you're on one drunk female,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how dangerous it is because she took her down. When she grabbed her on the wall by her hair, she took her straight down.
Right.
I mean, it was some pushing there, yes.
I'm asking you, I mean, Christy Faye was giving her every reason to think she was in the fight.
I didn't see Christy Faye swing on her. I just heard I heard the commands, and she wouldn't listen to them.
Right. But you did see Christy Faye try to kick her several times.
She was down when she did it, yes.
I
seen
understand. Now, did you hear Christy Faye say she was pregnant?
that. I did.
That was a lie, wasn't it?
I don't know.
Okay.
But I did hear her say that.
You told the investigator who came to see you that Christy Faye was flailing around after she went to the ground before and after being handcuffed. Isn't that what you told Major Leonard?
Yes.
Okay. So even after she's handcuffed, she's flailing around, kicking, screaming, cussing.
Well, she's not flailing any arms. They're handcuffed on her. What she was doing was sitting on her behind,
Okay. How hard?
arguing with this lady, kicking at her.
Tell me which door she kicked at your house.
My front door.
How hard did she kick it?
I don't know.
Well, were
It
you
didn't break it in. No.
Were you inside or outside?
I was outside in the yard.
She kick it with the heel, like kind of stomp it in, or did she kick it with her toe? Do you know? Did you see it or just hear it?
I didn't see the first kick. I heard it.
Okay.
And the second one, it was just the bottom of her foot, it looked like.
Okay. So she kicked your door twice.
2 or 3 times, yes.
And if she went to kicking you, would you have defended yourself?
Object to the relevance.
I don't know that what may have occurred will be an issue here for us to consider, so I'll sustain the objection.
I'll withdraw the question. Mr. Campbell, have you ever been convicted of a felony?
I have, but I was told that I'm not on trial here.
That's all the questions I have.
Do you have any follow-up questions, Mr. Milliken?
I'd like to make him subject to recall.
I'm sorry?
Would like to have him subject to recall.
Okay.
Mr. Campbell, describe for the commission what Sergeant K's attitude, what, based on your observation of her, while this was going on, while she's punching Christy Fay handcuffed on the ground, what was her demeanor, or what was her, describe that for the commission, if you will, please.
All right. When Christy Fay spit on her, that's when it all started. She looked just as mad as Christy Fay looked. Like they was both, going at each other. There was, I don't think you could have stopped her at that moment from hitting her as many times as she did. She wouldn't. I said, please quit hitting her, and she wouldn't.
Was she, how would you describe the punches? Were they,
They were some that I wouldn't want to take.
you would not want to take them?
No. She's a pretty powerful woman.
Have you ever seen anybody be so drunk or so high that they could break out of handcuffs before?
Objection.
No, I don't know that that's going to be something we consider, Mr. Milliken. Thank you.
Okay. What was Sergeant K's attitude after she got up and stopped punching her in the head?
She kind of was talking to everybody over in the yard, saying this is what happens when you spit on an officer. She was mad. Now, I don't blame her for being mad, but she was mad.
She was mad. Sergeant K was mad based on your observation of her?
Yes, sir, she was.
Okay. That's all. Thank you for answering my questions.
Anything else, Mr. Simpson?
Did you know that Christy Fay Gammon is hepatitis C positive?
I have had her say that. I've heard her say it, but I didn't. That don't mean a lot of
And
people say it.
You know that that's a communicable disease, correct?
I think it is.
Okay. And you wouldn't want somebody to give it to you by spitting in your face, would you?
No, I wouldn't.
Okay.
But she didn't give spit in the face.
Well, that's not where it ended up landing, but you weren't between the two of them when she got spit on either, were
I
you?
seen the spit come out of her mouth. And
Right.
I seen where it hit. It hit right here.
Okay. But you don't know where it was intended to go either, do you?
I have no idea where it was
And
intended.
you would agree that that's one of the most vile acts that one human can use towards another.
No, I don't think that's the most violent act you can
I
use.
said it's
towards
one of the
somebody.
most vile.
I think he heard
I
the
think
word
it's-
violent.
Vile, not violent, vile.
Oh, vile.
Nasty.
Okay. I'd say yes, probably is.
Okay. And you don't blame her for being mad.
No, I mean, I don't blame her for being mad.
Okay.
But I also think that she should have controlled some of that madness.
I don't have any other questions.
All right. Does anyone on the commission have a question for Mr. Campbell? Mr. Campbell, Mr. Simpson has asked that you be available for recall.
May I ask when this recall is?
It
I've
would-
got a doctor's appointment tomorrow, and I go to Nashville Friday. I'm supposed to have
Well,
surgeries.
It'll be this afternoon if we...
It would be today. If we can just get maybe you can give.
Do you have a
Michelle
phone
our
number that you can...
Well, now I have
He's got a transportation issue. We had to provide transportation for him to be here.
I've got pneumonia.
Arranged for that.
And I've got some busted ribs, and I can't hardly walk.
So if he's going to need to be recalled, though,
He can stay here?
we'll have to get him. No,
Oh,
your witnesses didn't.
We'll,
okay.
I'm sorry?
I just want him subject to recall, and however Mr. Milliken wants to handle that's fine with me.
The city will take care of getting you back and forth where you need to be if you'll make sure that we have a phone number where to reach you. I'll also instruct you that you can't discuss your testimony with anybody or watch the rest of this on TV until you're finally released from our...
What channel is it on? I don't even know.
as nobody ever watches it. I don't know why I give the warning anyway, so. Thank you, Mr. Campbell.
Thank you.
Do you have a phone number to give her, please?
I have a phone number
Do you?
for him.
Okay, thank you. We're going to take, if I could see the lawyers just a minute up here, we're going to take a 10-minute break. If I could ask the audience just to sit tight for a few minutes and let us run to the restroom before y'all cut free. Okay, we'll return to the hearing. Mr. Milliken, you have a next witness did you tell me?
I do, Your Honor, Michelle Owen.
Michelle Owen, I think Ashley's gone down to get her. Would you provide me a brief summary of what you expect her to testify to?
She was the second responding officer on the scene. She was the officer that Mr. Campbell testified was right there when this occurred and pulled him off.
I understand. Thank you. Officer Owen, if you would, if you come down and sit in the center chair where the microphone is located. Please, if you'd raise your right hand, you swear the testimony you're about to give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Thank you. Please be seated. You state your rank and name, please.
Patrol Officer Michelle Owen, I work for the City of Bowling Green.
Thank you. Mr. Milliken.
Thank you, Your Honor. Officer Owen, how long have you been a police officer here in Bowling Green?
Be going on 8 years, sir.
On 8 years?
Yes, sir. I began in 2007.
Michelle, can you scoot that microphone a little closer to you, please?
I didn't want to get too close to it.
Thanks.
I'm going to ask you if you recall the incident on April the 26th out at the corner of 11th and Payne Street. Do you recall that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you've been interviewed by Sergeant Bowles regarding the incident, correct?
Major Bulls, yes.
I mean Major Bowles, I'm sorry. And you filed written reports yourself regarding the incident, correct?
Yes, sir.
And will you tell the commission how that works, just so we've kind of got that out there when there's a use of force situation, or what did you do as far as reports in this case were concerned?
I did a supplement to the use of force in addition to the other officers' use of force reports. And then we also did a statement. I think it was on the 29th of April. We did statements also.
Would this be your statement here, a one-page statement dated 4/29/14, and it looks like that's your signature on there, Michelle Owen? Does that look like it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Have you reviewed that statement since you typed it out?
Yes, sir. I got it yesterday.
Okay, so you reviewed it yesterday.
Yes,
So
sir.
did that help you recall the events as they transpired?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'm not going to just read this into the record, but I want to just ask you and have you do you have this statement with you?
I did not bring it, no, sir.
Okay. I'm not going to just read this into the record, but I want to just ask you and have you kind of, do you have this statement with you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. would it help you to look at it while I'm asking you these questions so that you can?
As far as the quote from it, yes, sir. Otherwise, I mean,
Okay. Was this the only statement that you made, this 429 written statement, or did you fill out some other forms as well?
there was the use of force also, sir.
And that use of force report would be this one because this is the supplement. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, as a supplement to the use of force.
I believe, and then that's your signature on the
Yes,
back
sir.
page of that. Would this use of force report be the first thing, the first time that you reported in writing to what went on, and then this narrative comes later? Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you say you filed this supplement use of force report because to supplement the other officers, and
Objection to the leading.
I'm asking who you're referring to on it when you say the other officer.
As far as the officer who did the original use of force, which would be Sergeant K, and then I do believe that Officer Biddle, Sergeant Porter, and Officer Poteet also did. I don't know if they actually did use of forces or not. I'm not sure about that. I know they're present at the scene, so I'm not sure.
Tell the commission what happened out there from the time you responded. Would you like to see your use of force report? Just so you can.
I'm going to object, Your Honor. She hasn't testified that she needs it. I think Mr. Milliken wants her to have it, but I think she can testify what she knows from her own memory. And if she says, I don't remember, then he can ask her if that would refresh her memory, is the way we do that.
That's fine. We'll proceed that way. I'll proceed along those lines.
Okay.
Without showing you your reports, can you tell us what happened out there from the beginning?
Basically, we were dispatched to 11th and Payne for a disturbance call. Sergeant K would have been the first one on scene. I don't know how close I'm supposed to get to this microphone. But Sergeant K was first one on scene. When I arrived on scene, I was coming from the Stebbins side of 11th Street. I saw Sergeant K's vehicle up ahead of me, the cruiser up ahead of me at the stop sign on the east side of 11th Street in Payne. Stopped by the stop sign, turned off, so I went ahead and pulled up behind her, turned my vehicle off, and then I approached on foot. I could see groups. There was two groups of people on each side of the street. On the west side of Payne, would have been the west side of Payne Street, 11th Street, out in front, on basically the side yards of the houses. Sergeant K, I could see her in the middle, on the left side of the street. There was a subject sitting in the ground, and then there was also another subject standing beside the person sitting in the ground. From the way
Let me interrupt you for a second. Did you later identify who the subject sitting on the ground was?
Yes.
And who was that?
So Christy Gammon. I keep on, is it Misty or Christy? I keep on getting those.
Christy Faye Gammon?
Yes, Christy Faye Gammon.
Did you identify who the subject was standing there?
Yes, I recognize him because I've dealt with Mr. Campbell before. I didn't know Mrs. Gammon.
And what's his full name?
Terry Gammon?
Terry.
I'm sorry, Terry Campbell.
Terry Campbell? Okay,
Yes.
go ahead. So,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Anyway, as I was approaching, I could tell that Mrs. Gammon probably had cuffs on just because of the way she was sitting on the ground. Pretty noisy. There was people both sides of the street. People were yelling back and forth. The situation wasn't really under control yet at that point because there was only two of us there. As I was coming up, Mrs. Gammon was still kicking and screaming, cussing. I don't even remember what all she was saying. She was basically screaming because she wanted me in cuffs, I'm sure. Mr. Campbell was trying to calm Mrs. Campbell down. By the time I almost got there, Mrs. Gammon spit on Sergeant K. Sergeant K moved towards Mrs. Campbell and Mrs. Gammon. I'm going to keep on. Okay. Sergeant K moved towards Mrs. Gammon, who had just spit on her. Campbell also started to move towards them. And I wasn't sure at this point what his part was in this entire situation. I went ahead and moved forward. I grabbed hold of Mr. Campbell, and I pulled him back. He basically did a controlled fall onto his butt on the sidewalk. He wasn't resisting me or anything at that point, so I didn't see him as any more immediate threat, so I turned back to see what was going on with Sergeant K and Mrs. Gammon. At that point, I saw Sergeant K was, Gammon was still screaming and kicking. Sergeant K was hitting her in the side of the head with closed fist, telling her to stop resisting. I said that's enough. And I'm not even sure if Sergeant K heard me or not. She stopped at that point because Gammon had stopped. She was calm for a minute. Myself and Sergeant K sat Mrs. Gammon back up. I went ahead and took control of Mrs. Gammon. Sergeant K stepped away. At that point, I noticed in my peripheral there was other officers arriving. So as far as what I saw, they're arriving on the, I'll say it would be, I guess, the north side of the street, because the one house there, they hadn't moved over to the other side of the street yet. There were some people on the other side of the street that were yelling because of Gammon's treatment. They were yelling and everything else as far as...
What do you mean yelling because of her treatment?
Because of the fact she had been hit. I don't know if they were aware she was pregnant or not. I know I found out later that she was pregnant. I know because of the fact she had been hit, they were yelling about that. There was a female who, and I can't recall exactly what she was saying. I just know she was saying that she shouldn't have been hitting Mrs. Gammon like that. Sergeant K shouldn't have been hitting Mrs. Gammon like that. Sergeant K took a step towards that group of people, and the one female took off down the street. Mrs. Gammon, who I was in control of, she started kicking and screaming again. There was I don't remember her name. She lives across the street also. She came across the street at that point to try to calm Mrs. Gammon down because she was, like I said, kicking, screaming. I was trying to talk to her to calm her down, to find out what was going on, what the entire situation was, why she was in cuffs, etc. While Sergeant K was, I think I saw Sergeant Porter step up and talk to Sergeant K at that point. Kept her there. Tried to keep her calm down. She would not calm down, so she ended up back in the ground again because she kept on trying to kick and scream and spit and move away from me, so I put her back down on the ground again. At some point in there, Sergeant K told me that Gammon had said she was pregnant. So once I got her calmed down again, I sat her back up again. Because usually most people in that situation, when they're cuffs and everything else, we can't control them. We just go ahead and keep them on the ground until we decide what we're going to do with them, as long as they're not any type of danger as far as breathing or anything else. It's just easier to control them on the ground.
Can you slow down just a little
sorry.
bit, please? I'm having a hard time.
I'm sorry, do I need to repeat anything, sir?
If you don't mind, start back to the point where most people,
if they're giving us that much trouble when they're in cuffs, we just go ahead and leave them on their stomach on the ground, 'cause it's just easier to control them. That way we can move up by their head and control them there. You can still talk to them and hear what they're saying, make sure they're breathing okay, etc. But because the fact Gammon had said she was pregnant, I went ahead and put her back up in the sitting position because I wasn't sure how far along she was or anything else. So she would get back up in the sitting position and she would start all over again. So I went ahead and laid her back down. At that point, that was when I know in my statement I said that she basically, she was screaming and she started moving her hips up and down, basically humping the ground, kept on screaming, kicking. She would calm down. I got her to a point where she was talking a little bit about what would happen, but it wasn't the situation at that point. She was talking about earlier in the day, and the neighbor who had stepped over to talk to us, she had said something about, I guess, earlier in the day, Mrs. Gammon's father had beat her up, and that's the reason why she was in the state she was in right now, I guess, because she had been drinking, etc. So, get to that point, had Mrs. Gammon sat back up. MedCom had been called. They arrived.
Who called
on scene.
MedCom?
As far as I recall, which I'm sure it's in the dispatch's notes, but I'm pretty sure it's Sergeant K.
Okay, did you ever talk to MedCom when they arrived there?
No, sir.
Did MedCom ever approach Christy Faye Gammon there
sir.
at the scene and
No,
offer
sir.
any treatment or anything?
No, sir.
What officer, if any, did talk to MedCom?
They went over and talked to Sergeant K, sir.
Were you privy to the conversation that Sergeant K had with MedCom?
No, I was dealing with Gammon, and it was still somewhat loud as
Okay.
far as the crowd and everything.
So did MedCom talk to anybody that you saw other than Sergeant K?
Not that I noticed.
Did they provide any treatment to anybody there at the scene?
As far as I remember, they took some type of wipes or whatever for the spit that was on Sergeant K. But other than that, I didn't see anything else, no, sir.
The timeline on it, I believe, I don't think they were there very long. Do you recall how long they were there? How long EMS was there?
What, like you said, it wasn't long. I don't know the exact time now.
Okay. But did they ever approach Christy Gammon and offer her any treatment?
No, sir.
Based on your observation of Christy Gammon, was she competent to refuse treatment, medical treatment there at the scene?
No, sir.
She was not, was she?
As far as her being intoxicated, etc., no.
Right. Did you transport her to the jail?
Yes, sir.
Did you have concerns about her injuries when you transported her to the jail?
Did I have concerns?
Yes.
No, sir, because I wouldn't have put her in the cruiser if I thought she was in any type of medical duress.
Okay. So did you book her into the jail?
I did not book her. I took her there when I got there. As far as I recall, I told the jail staff that medical would need to see her, and then I just waited for Sergeant K to get there.
And why did you tell the jail staff that medical would need to see her?
For one, she had said she was pregnant. Two, she had been in the altercation. And three, she did have dried blood on her hands.
And when you say she'd been in the altercation, what you mean by that is Sergeant K had her handcuffed down on the ground, pounding her in the side of the head.
Objection to the leading. My
Right.
Lord.
I think
As
you
far
can
as
ask
being
that
struck, yes,
question
sir.
in a little better way without
I
leading.
mean, that
if you don't
is
mind.
the most leading question of the century.
Well, I'm glad to have that honor. How would you describe the altercation? Christy Gammon was handcuffed, correct?
Yes, Krista Gammon was handcuffed. She was face down on the cement there by the curb, and Sergeant K was striking her in the side of the head.
She's handcuffed, face down on the asphalt, and Sergeant K is striking her in the head.
Yes.
Asked and answered, and leading again.
So is that the altercation
Hang on
that you're
just, hang
referring
on
to?
just a minute.
Leave me.
We're
Is-
going to go ahead and let you answer that one. Thank you.
Is that accurate? That's the altercation that you're referring to?
Yes, sir.
And so you felt like when you took Christy Gammon to jail that she needed to be assessed because Sergeant K had her down on the asphalt
Objection
punching
to
her
the
in the
leading.
head. Is that correct?
That
I
is a
do,
leading question.
I do think we can ask the question in a way for her to provide her own answer there.
Why did you ask for her to be seen at the jail by medical staff?
Because in fact she had stated she was pregnant, because she had dried blood on her hands, because of the altercation, which we already discussed, and she was intoxicated. A lot of times the jail will refuse people if they think they need to be medically checked at the hospital before they take them in there.
Okay. Did you feel like she needed to be medically checked?
As far as, yes, I mean, that's just a better way to go.
Okay. Were you disciplined in connection with this incident yourself, Officer Owen?
I was put on administrative leave, yes.
For how long?
It was probably close to a month. I don't remember the exact days, but it was about a month
What for?
for the medical, because in fact, I should have said something when Medicom was there to have them look at Christy Gammon.
Okay. On your use of force report, did you put that Christy Faye Gammon had refused treatment?
Yes, she was refusing help from anything and everybody, but no, they never actually came over and talked to her, and they should have.
And they should have,
Yes.
correct? But you never talked to Medcom yourself,
No, I did not, sir.
and the only officer that you saw talking to Medcom was Sergeant K.
Yes, sir.
And you saw them assisting her with the spit on her uniform, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How many times did you see Sergeant K punching Christy Faye Gammon in the head?
As far as I recall, it was 3.
So you saw 3 times.
Yes, sir.
Okay. She was already in handcuffs when you got to the scene, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Do you recall Sergeant K saying anything after you said that's enough, I believe? Is that what you said? You said?
Yes, sir.
Did Sergeant K say anything?
Not that I recall at that point, no.
You don't recall her saying anything to you or the crowd or anybody?
No, I don't, sir. I'm sorry, I don't.
Tell me what should have happened as far as medical is concerned when EMS arrived there. What should have happened?
They should have assessed her, and if she refused treatment, then she could have signed the thing, but with her being intoxicated, et cetera, then usually they go ahead and check them out anyway.
Well, that was my question. As a police officer, unfortunately, one of the things I would assume that you have to deal with is belligerent people on a fairly regular basis. Would that be a fair statement?
Yes, sir.
How do you handle that type of situation when you have somebody that you thinks needs medical attention, but they're incoherent and yelling and stuff? What is your What is your job, as far as you understand it, as far as getting them medical treatment?
To go ahead and have MedCom look at them. As far as I usually do blood pressure, they'll do their general assessment of them, and then if they don't think they need to go to the hospital, then we can sign a refusal if the person's in cuffs, if the person doesn't want to sign the refusal.
And what if the person is not competent to refuse medical treatment? Then what do you do?
As far as not competent, drunk?
Yes.
Okay.
Just like
Not
Christy
competent.
Fay was.
Okay. Like I said, we go ahead and have them assessed, and then we can sign the refusal. If there's no reason for them to go, and really at that point, if medical comes and they say they don't need to go with them, I don't think they usually have us sign anything because they're not refusing, they have been checked.
Okay. I need just a moment, please.
Yes, sir. Let's wait until Alan finishes and then we'll follow.
Let's see, that's what I'm looking for. May I approach the witness, please?
Yes, sir.
I want to show you these two documents and ask you if you can identify. I'll put this one on. I'm good. Thank you. If you can identify for the commission what those are, please.
Those are the statements that I wrote, the use of force and also the statement.
Okay, the use of force report, it's actually the supplement, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And what's the date on that you did that?
The date is the 26th, but it was actually down on the 29th. There it is on the back, the 29th.
Is that your signature on the back?
Yes, sir.
And did you prepare that narrative there?
Yes, sir.
Is that a true and correct copy of your use of force supplement statement?
Yes, sir.
Look at, and how many pages is that document, ma'am?
It's just front and back, sir.
Okay. And what's that second page on there?
It's the supervisor's statement.
All right. So it's 2 pages total that I have stapled together there.
Yes, sir.
And what about that second document? How many pages is that?
Just looks like it's front and back, sir.
The second document, though, the one on the bottom.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's just front, sir.
Okay, and what is that, ma'am?
That's the statement that I wrote the same day,
And what's the date on that?
the 29th.
Is that a true and accurate copy of your statement there
Yes, sir.
with your signature?
Yes, sir.
I move the introduction of these 2 documents as petitioners' exhibits 1 and 2 respectively.
I don't dispute that they're authentic documents, but at this point, they're just cumulative and irrelevant. And if we're just going to put in testimony by reports, then I would have to literally question her over every word in every one of those reports.
Why?
Well, because she's testified as to what she saw that night, and I'm very prepared to question her about that. But, I mean, these reports and these statements are very long, and I don't think we need to get into just putting reports into evidence. Generally speaking, police reports are not admissible. Just the reports themselves.
This is an administrative hearing, I go ahead and give reports. You testify to them.
Ms. Owen, is there anything in these reports that vary from what you testified to today?
far as the medical treatment offered to subject is marked as yes and refused. And then, other than that, I don't think so, sir, no.
Okay, I'm going to allow them in. This is exhibits 1 and 2, did you say,
Yes, sir.
for plaintiff? And your objections noted?
Can we identify what one is?
1 is the supplemental use of force report, and 2 is the written statement.
Supplemental use?
Yes.
Is that all, Mr. Milken?
I need just a second, Your Honor, please. Officer Owen, given these circumstances as you've stated them to be, did you find it unusual that Sergeant K did not direct MedCom to Christy Gammon to assess her?
Yes, sir.
Did you inquire of Sergeant K why she did not have MedCom assess Christy Gammon at the scene?
No, sir, I did not, and I should have.
You should have.
Yes, sir.
Was she a supervisor? Was she your supervisor?
She's one of the sergeants on the shift, yes, sir.
Okay. So she outranked you. Did that have something to do with why you didn't question her about not having Christy Fay examined at the
Objection
scene?
to the leading.
I'm going to permit that.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other reason other than she had rank on you?
No, sir.
Let me ask you about use of force on someone who's handcuffed. Based on your training as an officer, under these circumstances, where a prisoner is handcuffed on the ground and she spits on you, you want to go up and object now?
No, because you'll say, let me finish my question.
Y'all let me deal with it. Direct the comments to me.
Under these circumstances, where the subject is arrested, handcuffed behind her back, on the ground, and she spits on you, is that a justifiable use of force to punch her in the face?
Objection.
And the nature of your objection is?
First of all, she's not been qualified as a police expert on this particular issue. Number 2, it leaves out one very important fact, is that she was also kicking at her. And I think ultimately the ultimate question is what you all think, and not necessarily what, if we're going to ask every police officer what their opinion is, they're going to have to be qualified as an expert.
I don't believe that to be the case on the qualification part of it, because he's asked based on her training and experience. So I'll allow you to answer that question.
What was the question again now?
I'll try to say it just exactly like I did before. Based on your training and experience, under these circumstances, where you've got an arrestee handcuffed on the ground, and she spits at you, and even we'll add, she's kicking and flailing around, is it ever appropriate to, under those circumstances, to strike the handcuffed arrestee on the ground with a closed fist in the face?
I don't know about the ever part, because there's always been, in that particular situation, I would say no.
In this particular situation, as you observed it, was it appropriate for her to strike this handcuffed prisoner in the face while she was down there on the ground?
Now that's a question I'll stop you on, because
Okay.
we already had the previous one.
Very good. I'll pass the witness then.
Mr. Simpson?
Officer Owen, you were second on the scene, correct?
Yes, sir.
And would it be fair to describe that scene as being a dangerous situation?
Very chaotic, yes, sir.
That area of town, through no fault of anyone's, I guess, is a dangerous area to be in, is it not?
Yes, sir.
There's a lot of drug use, a lot of intoxication in that area,
Yes, sir.
and there's a lot of violent crime in that area. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
When you go to a scene such as that, is there a heightened sense of awareness of your safety?
Yes, sir.
And that particular night, you heard the radio traffic through dispatch, correct?
Yes, sir.
and you knew that Baker 1, which would be Sergeant K, was en route over there, correct?
Yes, sir.
And where were you at that point when you heard this radio traffic?
As far as where I was originally, I can't remember exactly where I was at. Like I said, I came from the Stebbins side, so I was on that side of the 30. I know I wasn't in 30 at that point because I was coming from somewhere else.
30 being the sector?
Yes, I was actually Baker 40 at the time, so
Okay.
which is on the other side of Fairview.
So you hear her en route. You heard the dispatch saying that there were a lot of subjects over there, a lot of screaming, and somebody may have a knife.
I don't remember that. I'd have to hear the actual dispatch again. That possibility, yes, sir.
Okay. And at some point, you heard Sergeant K come over the radio and say, "I've got some chick frickin' resisting." You heard that?
I'd have to say, I don't remember, sir. I'd have to hear that again.
Well, let's assume that that's what
Okay.
was said. Did you step up your response level at that point?
Pretty sure I was already level, no, I didn't go level 1 because I know I didn't turn stuff off, so I think I was almost there.
You were close already,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I wasn't far behind her anyway getting on scene, so,
Okay. And when you arrived there, you finally visualized Sergeant K, correct?
as I was walking up, yes, sir, I saw her.
And how many people were outside sort of seeing this whole spectacle?
There was probably at least 7 on the one side of the street, and I'm going to say 7 more on the other side of the street, plus the 2 in the middle.
Okay, so there's close to 20 people out there?
Yes, sir.
And Sergeant K had already been on scene by herself at this point, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You didn't see, when you got there, Miss Gammon was already handcuffed, correct?
Yes, sir.
And how many seconds passed? Just take us through, as you walked up there and you saw all of this going on, describe Miss Gammon's demeanor, what she was saying, if you can remember specifically, and what she was doing.
As I recall, she was screaming cuss words. She was kicking, screaming, moving around, trying to roll around, and etc. I want to say Mr. Campbell, because he was standing there talking to her, she wasn't actually trying to roll onto the ground or anything else, but I know she was moving around. He was trying to calm her down, but she was not calming down.
Okay. And then things, I guess, got heated enough that you felt like you had to come and get Mr. Campbell out of the way because you didn't know who he was or whether he might be trying to injure Sergeant K, correct?
Yeah, once Mrs. Gammon spit on Sergeant K and everybody moved, like I said, I was probably steps away at that point. I still wasn't sure what was going on, so I went ahead and grabbed Campbell because I saw her going for Mrs. Gammon, so I grabbed Campbell to move him away from the situation because I wasn't sure if it was domestic or what it was at this point.
And at the same point when Miss Gammon spit on Sergeant K, she was also kicking at Sergeant K as well, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you would agree as a police officer that while it may not be ideal to hit someone in handcuffs, you have to protect yourself, do you not?
Yes, sir.
And when Sergeant K struck her, the entire time she was striking her, she kept yelling, "Stop resisting, stop resisting." Is that correct?
I do recall her yelling, "Stop resisting," yes,
And
sir.
as soon as she stopped resisting, she stopped getting hit, didn't she?
Yes, sir.
And I believe you told in one of your written statements, you gave a use of force report, correct?
Yes, sir.
A supplemental use of force report.
Well, no, mine would have been the supplement, sir.
Yours was the supplement,
Yes, sir.
okay. And then you were interviewed not once but twice by Major Penny Leonard, correct?
That was later on, yes, sir.
Okay. And you told Major Leonard that
I know.
she struck her.
Just
Major
for the
Bowles.
record, that's Penny Bowles. She's been
Yeah, it's
Bowles
Major
for
Bowles.
many years.
It's back to Bowles. Sorry. I've known her for a long time.
I understand. That's just for the
Major
record.
Bowles. You told Major Bowles that she got hit 2 or 3 times, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, even after Sergeant K struck her, there for a few minutes she calmed down, correct?
As far as saying once she stopped,
Once she stopped, she hit her, gained control of her again, and Ms. Gammon stopped kicking and flailing for at least for a few seconds, correct?
Yes, sir. That's when I took control over, yes.
And then she started again, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you literally had to hold on to her to get her to stop. Is that right?
She didn't stop. I had to hold on to her to keep her to stay in one spot and not be thrashing at everybody, etc.
And at this point, other officers have arrived,
Yes, sir.
and Sergeant K was sort of allowed to step away from it for a second, catch her breath, right?
Yes, sir.
And as the other officers arrived, as the supervisor on scene, she also had to try to figure out why you were there to start with, correct?
Yes, sir.
So Sergeant K went with the other officers to try to figure out what the disturbance was around behind the house. Is that right?
As far as I recall, sir, she was about 5 or so feet away from me the entire time. So I know Sergeant Porter came and he talked to her, but I mean, I could pretty much see Sergeant K the entire time. She was not that far away.
Okay. And you had control of this arrestee at this point.
Yes, sir.
And, I mean, the ambulance is there, right?
It arrived a little while after that. Yes, sir.
Did you prevent the ambulance personnel from coming over and checking on Miss Gammon?
No, sir, but I should have called them over.
Okay, but you didn't prevent them from coming over.
No, sir.
And Sergeant K certainly never prevented them from coming over.
No, sir, not that I know of.
She didn't say, she's refused treatment, you can leave.
I don't know what she said, sir. I wasn't.
And you didn't say that either.
No, sir.
Okay. Do you know what kept the ambulance service from coming over and checking on Miss Gammon? Was it Miss Gammon's behavior, or they just decided not to?
I don't know, sir.
But to the best of your knowledge, not one city police officer told EMS that she didn't need any help, correct?
Not to my knowledge, no, sir.
Okay. And Sergeant K, you would admit, was busy with other things going on at the scene.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I want to make sure later on when we get to this situation where we're discussing sort of in the closing of all of this is you knew that the jail medical staff needed to check her out,
Yes, sir.
but you don't believe that she needed to go in the ambulance to the hospital. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, sir. It's a fair statement.
Okay. When she got in your cruiser, she was still wild as can be, correct?
She would calm down, then she would start up again because the neighbor who came over to talk to her got her to calm down when we first got her in the car, standing there talking to her. But once we moved off from there, which is on my video, she started up again.
Okay, and you, just for the record, you had a video camera in the back passenger compartment of your vehicle, correct?
Yes, sir.
It would have been mounted over the left rear passenger door, pointing in to Miss Gammon,
Yes.
and that was submitted as a part of your report, is that correct?
As far as I know, yes, sir.
Okay. And Miss Gammon calmed down when this lady was talking to her,
Yes, sir.
and as soon as you started to pull off, she went wild again, didn't she?
Yes, sir.
Started banging her head, screaming, cursing.
I haven't seen the video, but as I recall, yes, she started cursing and she was moving around in the back seat. Yes, sir.
Okay. And do you know what happened when you got to the jail? There's obviously several jail staff there. She was calm for a bit at the jail, correct?
The entire time I was there, she was calm because she calmed down once we went inside, and while I was there, she stayed calm as far as I recall.
Okay. You weren't there when Miss Gammon apologized to Sergeant K, were you?
No, I was not, sir.
Okay. Now, how many officers arrived ultimately, to the best of your knowledge? Biddle, Porter, you, Kay, that's 4.
And Officer Poteet,
So there are 5 Bowling Green City police officers there.
as far as I recall, yes, sir.
That's sort of a big show of force and might, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that was done because there was almost a riot over there.
As far as the amount of people, yes, sir.
Okay. So every time you would set her up on her rear end, she would start struggling and trying to roll back over on her stomach while you were there?
I don't know if she was trying so much to roll back over on her stomach as she was just trying to move away, somehow get away from you, etc. She was just kicking her legs, moving around and everything else, flopping her head around trying to get away.
And you literally had to hold on to her the entire time?
Yes, sir.
Okay. She never tried to kick you?
I was behind her, sir.
Okay, she never tried to spit hepatitis C in your face?
No, sir.
Okay.
Let me see this. I need this.
Most of the police officers that work that side of town know that Christy Faye Gammon has a communicable disease, correct?
That I don't know, sir.
Were you aware of that?
No, sir.
Okay. She was not knocked unconscious, was she?
No, sir.
And I want to make sure that the commission understands this too, and I want to make sure I understand it. As soon as she stopped resisting, she stopped hitting her, correct?
Yes, sir.
So she didn't just lay there and wail on her for a minute and hit her 30 or 40 times.
No, sir.
Okay. That's all the questions I have this time.
You have any follow-up, Mr. Milliken?
Yes, sir, thank you. She's handcuffed at the scene. She's kicking and screaming. You'd seen her spit on Sergeant K. Why were you standing behind her?
Just so that's the better way to approach a person who's acting like that.
Would you agree with me that from a tactical standpoint, that's how you keep from getting kicked at?
You can go ahead and answer that question.
Say it again, sir.
Would you agree with me that from a tactical standpoint, when you've got a drunk subject on the ground handcuffed and they're kicking and have spit, you shouldn't approach them from the front?
Yes, sir.
After Officer K got Christy handcuffed on the ground, did she disengage from her?
When I was approaching, she was probably maybe a foot or so away while she stopped her because you had the crowds on both sides. I'm sure she was probably trying to pay attention to what was going on
Okay.
because she was the only one there at that time.
But did she, in fact, how did she approach her? How was she approaching her when she was spit on?
From the front, sir.
Okay, so Sergeant K was approaching from the front, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that was clearly after she was handcuffed and kicking and stuff as well, correct?
Yes, sir.
Based on your training and experience, if you have somebody handcuffed on the ground and they're flailing around like that, what should you do with them?
As far as you need to keep positive control of them once they're in cuffs, and I usually try to remove them from the scene if possible.
Why was she not put in the car and taken away? Why was she there handcuffed on the ground?
I don't know the reasoning at that point.
Mr. Simpson was asking you some questions about, he said it was almost a riot there. Was anybody else that you saw destroying any property or fighting with anybody or anything?
As far as when I walked up, because at that situation, as soon as I walked up, I was pretty much focused on Mrs. Gammon because she was a handful. I didn't see any, as far as in the immediate area, anything going on, no, sir. But
Okay.
there was a lot of screaming and yelling. People were upset because of the situation.
And what were they upset about? What part of the situation?
As far as like I already said, because Sergeant K had struck her when she struck her.
While she was handcuffed.
Yes, sir.
So would you agree with me that if you're in a bad neighborhood and there's a,
Objection to the leading.
Yeah, can you ask a direct
Okay.
question?
what precautions would you have taken as, well, let me ask it another way. I'll strike that. Given that there was a bunch of people out there watching, would that have any impact on what your actions would have been as far as striking this handcuffed prisoner?
Sorry, ask that again, sir.
How do you think that affected the crowd out there?
It probably upset them more, sir.
That is what would incite a riot, wouldn't it?
Possibly, sir.
It doesn't really matter what neighborhood this was in, does it?
Yes and no, sir. Some areas get a lot more attention than other areas. Whenever the police show up, a lot more of the neighbors come out to see what's going on, and 30 would be one of those areas. Anytime something's going on, you have a crowd, especially if you're there for any extended period of time.
It's a high call area, no doubt, right?
Yes, sir.
But those people down there shouldn't be treated any differently than a call that you make out at Bentry or someplace like that, correct?
Correct, sir.
Okay. And your training and policy doesn't differentiate between whether you're in a good neighborhood or a bad neighborhood, does it?
No, sir, because anything can happen in any neighborhood.
Right. What's your understanding on use of force? What type of force are you authorized to use as a police officer?
All the way up to deadly force, sir.
I know, but what are the qualifiers on it?
Objection.
There's-
That's a legal question.
That's,
Well, I don't think it's necessary if we're going to, looking at your witness list, I understand you're going to bring the training people in. Is that correct?
Yes.
Maybe it would be more appropriate to
Okay.
ask them.
I want to ask you about how many times, I believe you said you saw Sergeant K strike her at least 2 or 3 times. I believe that's what you said. Is that right?
yes, sir.
But at the first part of the altercation, you were focused on getting Terry Campbell out of the way. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. My back was turned for however long that took.
Okay. So was she striking her while your back was turned as well?
I don't know, sir.
Okay.
Like I said, there's a lot of noise, so I mean, I couldn't hear, and I was dealing with him, so I wasn't paying attention to what she was doing at that point.
And tell me what you saw when you turned back around.
When I turned back around, she was drawing her fist back, and I said probably hit her about 2 more times in addition to that.
Okay. Was she on top of Christy Fay, or standing over her, or sitting on her, or what? Do you recall?
I'm not going to say she had her body weight on her. She was standing over her, bent over, hitting her, as far as I recall.
Okay. That's all. Thank you.
Do you have any follow-up, Mr. Simpson?
You got between Mr. Campbell and Sergeant K?
No, actually, Campbell was on one side of Gammon. Gammon was here, and then Sergeant K would have been here. So I actually got between Gammon and Mr. Campbell to pull him
Campbell.
away, because I wasn't sure if he was trying to go over Gammon towards Sergeant K or not.
So when you grabbed Mr. Campbell and sort of escorted him to the ground, you knew, I think you said in some of your reports that he had some health problems, so you just kind of took him softly to the ground?
Something like that.
He
yes,
wouldn't
sir.
have been able to see how many times Sergeant K hit Miss Gammon, would he?
I don't know, sir.
Okay. And how far away was Sergeant K's car parked from where Miss Gammon was sitting on the ground?
It was across the intersection. I'm not great with distance. I would say probably 25 yards. I don't know if it'd be even that far. I'm not great with it. But basically, you have the street there. We were on the far side of the street, and our cars were parked on the other side of the street. So you have the
Understand.
intersection in between.
You ended up having to pull your car up to load her up, correct?
Yeah, so she wouldn't have to walk so far, because she
Because
didn't have
she
any shoes or
didn't-
socks on.
Okay. And you don't fault Sergeant K for once she thought she had her under control because of the crowd that was gathering from stepping back and protecting her flanks, essentially, correct?
No, sir.
So you don't have an issue with her not literally holding on to her the whole time while people are approaching. You don't have a problem with that.
I mean, every situation is different. You have to deal with it yourself, sir, because you're the one that's in the situation. So.
Right. So we're clear, though. You don't have a problem with her letting go of her and stepping back and making sure she's safe. Sergeant K.
Sorry, if that's the way she felt to take care of the situation, then yes.
Okay. No further questions.
Mr. Denning, you had a question. Would you pick up your microphone, please, sir?
One question. I didn't get an understanding as to why you were disciplined. Explain that to me again.
Because I did not provide medical aid to Mrs. Gammon, so I was in control of her. When MedCom got there, and I should have called them over.
Okay. But you did comment to the jailer when you got there that she may need some assistance.
I told them she needed to be checked, yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other commissioner have a question? I have a couple, if you don't mind. The process when you take someone to jail, they have medical people on staff to look at any prisoner that comes in. You don't automatically have to take them to the ER before you get a permission slip to put somebody in jail.
Do they have people on staff? Yes, sir. They have nurses on staff, et cetera, that are qualified. Because they would be the ones that refuse. Because I know whenever we get DUIs and stuff, we don't automatically take them to the hospital. We take them there first, and they decide whether or not they're going to accept them or not.
Okay. That's just a change in procedure in the last 20 years since I've been around. But you had custody of Miss Gammon for a period of time while she's still flailing around. Tell me why you didn't take her straight to your car and secure her there.
No, Sergeant K had told me to wait.
There at the scene, you didn't know whether she was going to be arrested or what?
Well, she was in cuffs. I don't remember if she was detained or arrested at that point, but she just, because I had asked her then if she wanted me to take her and put her in my cruiser, and she said just to wait.
And you don't know why?
I didn't ask, no, sir.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. That's it.
You said the jail staff checked her out, medical staff at the jail checked her out once you arrived at the jail?
I requested them. I don't remember if because it was busy that night. I don't remember if they were up there when I left, because I wasn't there for that long, and Sergeant K came in, so I went ahead and left, so it was a busy night.
Okay. If the jail medical staff had found her in need of further medical assistance, would they have sent her to the hospital?
We would have taken her, because they don't actually take over custody until they vacate her.
So if she was really severely hurt from that, she would have been taken to the hospital?
Yes, sir. Sorry, ma'am.
That's okay. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
I do have a follow-up question.
Okay.
You would agree with me that she did not suffer any serious physical injury prior to going to the jail?
As far as I knew, no, sir.
Okay.
I mean, bruises and stuff come up later, too. I don't know, sir. She wasn't.
So you're taking responsibility for not getting her the medical treatment because you had control of Miss Gammon, correct?
Yes, sir.
And so that's not Sergeant K's fault that she didn't get medical treatment. Would you agree with
Objection.
that?
Yeah, I think that's a conclusion for us to make here.
Do you believe that it was her responsibility to make sure she got medical treatment since you had control of Miss Gammon?
That's as far as the way it usually works. If you're the one that takes them into custody, you need to make sure that they get taken care of. But I took over control of her, so I should have made sure.
And not Sergeant K?
Yes, sir.
No further questions.
All right.
Is it usually?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. May
Did
I
you have
ask
another question?
just a
Yeah.
couple? Is it usually the officer that calls EMS to begin with that when the
Objection to
EMS
the
gets
leading.
there?
No, that's a direct question. Go ahead.
Is it usually the one that calls EMS to begin with, the one that directs EMS to the subject?
Usually, sir, 'cause usually there's not that many people on scene as far as,
Right.
depending on the situation.
And the reason why you had control of the prisoner is because you had pulled Sergeant K off or told her that's enough, and that's why you had control, correct? At
That's
that-
the reason why I took over control at that point, yes, sir.
Right, okay, thank you.
Are we going to have any reason to recall Ms. Owen?
You know, there could be. It would be much later, I would
I
imagine.
was going to say, you'll be available by phone if we need to call, if we give you plenty of notice to.
Yes, sir, I'll
reappear.
be. I come
Okay.
on shift at 1400, so.
So would remind you if you would not discuss your testimony with anyone and not watch any broadcast of this proceeding. So you're excused at this point. Mr. Milliken, who's your next witness?
Your Honor, I'm going to call Deputy Stacy Ennis. She is a deputy at the Warren County Regional Jail that received Christy Faye Gammon. That'll testify about her injuries and the treatment that she got there at the jail. And I'm
Stacy.
thinking that she's down in the conference room, I hope.
What's her name?
Did you say Stacy Ennis?
Ennis, yes.
I don't see her on your witness list.
Well,
Am I missing a page? Beg pardon? 16? Oh, I'm sorry. You do have it. I apologize.
good, you made me nervous there for a second.
Yeah. And you expect her to testify to what?
She was the intake officer, deputy at the jail, who received Christy Faye Gammon when Officer Owen brought her into the jail, and her testimony will be about her appearance and her injuries, and that she
Okay.
got her medical treatment.
All right, thank you. Ms. Ennis, would you mind coming, sitting right up in the front here, please, about where the microphone is? Would you raise your right hand, please, and be sworn? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Would you state your full name, please?
Stacy Ennis,
And your work address is,
920 Kentucky Street,
and you're
a
employed?
deputy jailer.
Thank you. Mr. Milliken?
Ma'am, you're here pursuant to a subpoena, is that correct?
Yes,
Do you recall, and you know why you're here, correct?
yes,
Do you recall Christy Faye Gammon being brought into the jail on April the 26th of 2014?
yes,
You know Christy Faye Gammon?
yes.
Okay. Can you describe or tell the commission what your role was in this when she was brought into the jail, and what you did and what you observed?
Okay. I reported to work about 22:55. That's when we report. Christy was already in our booking room with a nurse. I was the processing deputy for Christy. When I went in, I observed that she had, to the left side of her face was really swollen. She had cuts on the right side in her hand. She had multiple lacerations on her hand. The nurse, I called the nurse back up to reevaluate her because she was bleeding. Her right hand had been bandaged, so when I pulled back the bandage, I could see the lacerations because there was blood coming through it. The nurse come back up and reevaluated her. Christy was belligerently drunk or high. She was screaming profanities. After I got her processed, we took her back to Little Detox, one of the Little Detox cells. She kept hitting the door, saying that she shouldn't be in there. She shouldn't be arrested. She don't know why she's here. We had to put her in the restraint chair about midnight that night. And of course we had to rebandage her hand because it was down. What else do you want to know about that night?
Let me ask you to describe the injuries to the side of her face.
Oh, it was the left side of her face. She had swelling from probably her eye area down below her cheek area. Through here, she had cuts on the right side of her face, right through here. We didn't know what happened to her.
Well, that was my next question. What did law enforcement advise you when she was brought in?
That it happened at the scene.
Did
That's it. That's all they said is it happened at
Objected,
the
but
scene.
unless we can identify who law enforcement is.
who said that to you?
I do not recall who said it. I know that Officer K had already left. So,
Move to strike.
But, so you don't know where it happened?
no.
Right.
Okay. Did you ever talk with Officer K?
No,
that evening?
no.
Did any Officer K or any other officer provide you with any information regarding the injuries beyond what you could just observe yourself?
Nothing but it happened at the scene. That's it.
May I approach the witness, please?
Yes.
Do you recall if you talked to Sergeant or Officer Owen, Michelle Owen? Did you talk with her? Do you recall?
She was still in the booking room. Like I said, it was change of shift, so I don't actually recall who said it.
Okay. What did the nurse do as far as assessing Christy Faye?
She took her vital signs, looked at her eyes, cleaned her face lacerations up, and her hand.
Did you have an opportunity to observe Christy Faye Gammon in the days subsequent to this incident?
Yes, I work her dormitory quite often.
Okay. So, like the next couple of days, did you see her?
Yes.
And will you describe what her face looked like in the next couple of days after this incident?
Her lacerations had scabbed on her face, but she did have black eyes, and she still had some bruising to her cheek and stuff, with minimal swelling at that time, as the days went on.
And about how long did you notice that? Over what period of days, if you recall?
It was week 10 days that, before it started subsiding.
So she was there in the jail all that time?
Yeah.
And when you say, just so everybody understands, when you say you work her, what'd you say,
Her dorm.
Her dorm?
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
We have 2 dorms at the Warren County Regional. One of them is a female housing facility, and the other one is a male housing facility. She was in the G dormitory. We have 6 dorms in that area, G 1 through 6. So we have to have a pod operator, is what we're called when we're there, to make sure that the inmates aren't fighting. They're following the rules. There's no disturbances, stuff like that. We have to be on site at all times with the inmates.
While you were there with Christy Faye, did anybody there at the jail take pictures of her?
Yes.
And who actually took the pictures? Do you recall?
My captain, Tim Robinson, took the pictures.
If I may approach the witness, I'd like to show you these pictures and ask you if those pictures correctly and accurately reflect what they depict in there, which is pictures of Christy Faye Gammon and her injuries.
Yes.
On what day?
On April 26th.
Yes.
Do they?
Yes.
If those have been represented to be the photos that were taken down there at the jail, would you think that's accurate?
Yes.
And how so?
You can tell she's in the jail. And these depict the type of pictures that we would take
Okay.
when someone comes in with an injury.
Is that what she looked like to you when you were assessing her on April 26th?
Yes.
Matt, may I see him back, please? And here's one that Mr. Simpson has showed the commission where she's smiling, right? And then these two are, what are these depict then?
Her right hand. Her
Okay.
hands where the lacerations and stuff were before.
And what does this photo of the side of her face depict?
That's where she had all the swelling and the bruising that started to come up from, her eye all the way down.
Okay. What's the process at the jail? You say somebody needs medical attention, the nurse comes. Who makes the determination about treatment or things like that when you have somebody, like in this situation, particularly in this situation? Why don't you just tell us who,
The processing deputy makes the decision on whether or not to call the nurse.
and you're the one that made that decision?
Yes.
And why did you make that decision?
She was bleeding, her face was starting to swell, so I called the nurse.
Okay.
I didn't, want to be liable for,
Not getting her medical
Right.
attention? Okay. And then what does the nurse do?
the nurse assesses her, takes her vitals, cleans any open wounds, dresses them, and she depicts whether or not she needs to go to the emergency room or not, or any inmate to the emergency room or not.
I'm going to show you 2 more pictures and ask you if those are just blown up versions, but if those fairly and accurately depict her injuries at the jail on April the 26th of 2014.
Yes,
Do those pictures likewise look like they were taken at the jail?
yes.
And what do those pictures show?
They show her face, the cuts underneath her eyes, the swelling on
The
both
s-
of them.
The swelling on her face?
Yes.
Thank you. Your Honor, I move the introduction of these pictures. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
No objection.
I beg your pardon?
No objection.
Are you entering them as one item?
I think so, Your Honor, if that's all right. I'd
Yes,
just
sir.
use one sticker and make this petitioner's composite exhibit
Sticker
number
on
3.
the,
if that's-
on the envelope, and that way we
Oh,
keep them
there
all
you go.
together.
Okay, very good. Yes, sir.
And you've seen them, have you not, Mr. Simpson?
Actually, Sergeant K took them, not,
Okay.
the jail didn't take them, she took them.
Okay. Oh, good. Sorry. Thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Milliken?
I believe I'm finished. If I could
Mr.
just.
Simpson?
Apologize for my. So after she was assessed by the nurse, then she was placed in the detox cell, is that correct?
Yes.
And then she was placed in a restraint chair that night as well, is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
I think that's all. Thank you.
Mr. Simpson?
Deputy Ennis, you never talked to Sergeant K the night that Christy Faye Gammon came in with these injuries, correct?
sir.
And you have no earthly idea where those injuries came from?
No, sir.
Okay. And when you came on shift, Christy Faye Gammon was already there,
Yes.
and she was highly intoxicated,
Yes.
highly belligerent.
Yes.
What profanities was she screaming?
She was dropping the F-bomb quite a bit. She was saying that she shouldn't be there. She don't know why the F she was getting arrested, and a lot of stuff that, just normal drunks say.
Was there a concern that she may have smoked synthetic marijuana or anything of that nature?
We just classify it as drugs and alcohol. She, because we don't drug test them unless we send them to the hospital.
Okay. So she was not drug tested that night?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Not to your knowledge. You know Miss Gammon, and I think when you were interviewed, you described her as a quote-unquote frequent flyer.
Yes.
And in jail parlance, that means she's been there a whole lot, right?
Yes.
Is she often combative and belligerent?
When she comes in intoxicated to that level, under drugs and alcohol, it's not her first time in the chair, it wasn't
I'm sorry,
her first
not
time.
her first time what?
It wasn't her first time in the chair,
In the restraining?
in the restraint chair.
And what is the criteria for putting someone in the restraint chair at the Warren County Regional Jail?
I object to the relevance, Your Honor.
This just goes to her wild state that continued even after she was at the jail.
Which is conceded, Your Honor.
That's true. It'll be a quick answer.
What is the criteria for being put in the restraint chair at the Warren County Regional Jail?
If they are going to cause bodily harm or damage to anyone or themselves or destruct any property, we place them in the restraint chair.
And if I understand correctly from your interview with Major Bowles, she was kicking the detox door, correct?
Yes,
She was an able-bodied person when she was in that detox cell, correct? She was able to walk around,
well, she was stumbling around.
stumbling around,
Right.
but she's
I mean-
so wild she starts kicking on the door.
Yes,
And that detox area, and I'm sure the city commissioners have been over there, but for the purposes of the record, is just around the corner and down the hall, and anybody in the booking area can hear the screaming and
Yes.
the kicking
Yes.
and the, okay. How long was she put in the chair?
we have a minimum of 4 hours
Okay.
that they go in the chair.
Did she eventually sober up and calm down?
Yeah, she calmed down.
Okay.
Her hands started hurting, so she calmed down because she wanted out.
You met with Nurse Steenbergen, is that correct? Or did you saw Nurse Steenbergen there that night, correct?
Yes, yes.
And are you aware that the only thing that Nurse Steenbergen saw her for was her bandaged hand and some problems with her mental status?
Well, that was after the fact. That was days. She come in, when I was there, she assessed her face and bandaged her hand and
And that
stuff
was
like
it?
that.
And
Took
that-
her vital signs and stuff like that.
Okay. And what is the criteria for the nurse, if you know, to say, we're not going to accept her, she needs to go to the hospital?
Elevated vital signs, if, that's one of the biggies, is
You have
elevated
to
vital
be
signs.
seriously physically injured in order to get sent to the hospital, correct? Or
Broken bones, suspected broken bones, stuff like that.
she had none of those things?
Not to my knowledge. I'm not a nurse though, but not to my
I
knowledge.
understand. Major Bowles read you a list of injuries that Miss Gammon had told her about.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember being interviewed by Major Bowles?
Yes,
Okay. And I believe you told Major Bowles that Miss Gammon never complained of the injuries that she complained of several weeks later, correct?
correct.
Okay. Anything else? That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you have any follow-up, Mr. Miller?
Oh, I do. May I?
Sure.
Were you there when the photographs were taken?
Not when Officer K took them, no.
All right. Do you know, did you actually see Captain Robinson taking pictures?
The photographs were under his name on the drive.
I got you.
So-
So, and you wouldn't know this necessarily, but Sergeant K is going to testify that she took the pictures and made copies for Mr. Robinson.
Okay, I
You
mean,
wouldn't have any reason to dispute that, would you?
I have no knowledge of any of that, so.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Ma'am,
Yes,
you've said that you had her assessed by the nurse at the jail because of the injury to the hand and the facial injuries that you could observe, correct? Was it reported to you by anyone, Officer Owen or Officer K, that Gammon had claimed to be pregnant?
not at that time.
Okay. Was that ever reported to you?
We have something that's called sick calls, up in the dorms. And I do believe she put in a medical request to get a pregnancy test in subsequent days.
Were you ever advised when she was booked into the jail that night that she was did any of the officers ever advise you that she was suffering from an excited delirium?
No.
Are you familiar with that term, excited delirium?
I mean, it's just someone that goes berserk in an excited state.
Okay, so but that was never
No.
related to you?
No.
Okay. So your assessment was just based on your observation of her physical appearance,
Right,
correct?
right, yes.
And the way she was acting?
Right.
Okay. Does the jail provide medical treatment per se? What's the role of
What kind of medical
the
treatment?
nurse? Well, I'm just wondering, what is the nurse simply in an assessment situation, or does she actually provide treatment?
We do provide triage treatment. Nothing like splitting broken bones or anything like that, but we do provide, and she does assess whether or not they need to go to the hospital. On if their vital signs are elevated, we'll refuse them, you know, if so, to that state. Now, she dressed her wounds and stuff like that, gave her an ice pack for her face, and well, once she sobered up.
Okay. Okay. So I believe I'm understanding you had no information concerning her injuries other than just it happened at the scene. Is that
Right, right. No, I didn't know anything that happened.
And I believe you never spoke with Sergeant K. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
I think that's all.
Deputy Ennis, when you were interviewed by Captain Bowles, you stated, and I think you've stated here today, that Miss Gammon was just complaining that she had been arrested, but didn't complain about being beaten up by the police.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yes. When Major Bowles and I were at the jail, she had asked me if she had been complaining in subsequent days, and she doesn't remember the incident at all.
Right. But that night when she came in, as drunk and crazy as she was acting, she knew she was in jail. She knew she was under arrest, correct? She was interacting with you and the police officers. And she never once pointed at Sergeant K and said, she beat me, she beat me.
Oh, I never seen Sergeant K, but I mean, no, she doesn't make any comments.
And
like
even
that.
after Sergeant K was left, after she left, she never said, that Sergeant K beat me.
No, sir, she didn't.
All right, no further questions.
Okay, Ms. Ennis, thank you for coming in. Is there any reason for her to be recalled that you can see? You're released from the subpoena. We would ask that you not discuss your testimony with anyone till the conclusion of the hearing.
Yes, sir.
And thank you for coming in. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll be recessing until 1 o'clock for lunch. I can see the attorneys before we head out. And I advise the commission.